In the remote hills of 18th century France, a shadow of terror stalked the countryside. Between 1764 and 1767, over 100 people fell victim to what locals called la Bête de Gévaudan, the Beast of Gévaudan. But was this really a wolf, or something far more sinister? Today's investigation will take you deep into one of history's most chilling mysteries, where the line between man and monster becomes terrifyingly blurred. Before we begin, I want to set the scene for you. Picture 18th century rural France, a world where superstition ruled daily life, where medical knowledge was primitive, and where the Catholic Church held absolute authority over people's understanding of good and evil. This was a time when wolves were genuinely feared predators, when traveling alone meant risking your life, and when unexplained deaths were often attributed to divine punishment or demonic intervention. Our story begins in the rugged Margeride Mountains of south-central France, in the historical province of Gévaudan. This was harsh, unforgiving terrain, dense forests, rocky outcroppings, and isolated villages, where everyone knew everyone else's business. The year was 1764, and life was already difficult for the local peasants. Harsh winters, failed crops, and crushing poverty were constants, but nothing could have prepared them for what was coming. The first attack occurred on June 30th, 1764, near the village of Saint-Étienne-de-Lugdares. 14-year-old Jeanne Boulet was tending cattle in the fields when she simply vanished. Her body was discovered hours later, and the sight that greeted the search party was unlike anything they'd ever witnessed. Her throat had been torn open with what appeared to be surgical precision, yet the wound patterns didn't match any known animal attack. But here's where things get strange, and I mean really strange. Witnesses from nearby fields described seeing a creature unlike any wolf they'd ever encountered. This thing stood nearly 4 feet tall at the shoulder, massive even by wolf standards. It had reddish-brown fur that seemed to shimmer in the sunlight, enormous fangs that protruded from its mouth even when closed, and most disturbing of all, it seemed to target humans exclusively, completely ignoring the livestock that should have been easy prey. Word of the attack spread quickly through the interconnected villages of Gévaudan, but most people initially dismissed it as a tragic but isolated incident. Wolves occasionally attacked humans, especially during harsh winters when food was scarce. But within weeks, it became clear that this was something entirely different. The attacks escalated rapidly, and with each incident, the creature displayed an almost human-like intelligence that defied everything locals knew about wolf behavior. It avoided traps with uncanny skill, seemed to anticipate the movements of hunting parties, and chose its attack locations with strategic precision. Professional hunters who had spent decades tracking wolves were completely baffled by this creature's behavior. The beast showed a clear preference for attacking women and children, often targeting them when they were most vulnerable, alone in fields, walking between villages, or gathering wood in the forests. But the manner of these attacks was what truly terrified the local population. Unlike typical predator kills, many victims were decapitated with precise cuts. Others had specific organs removed with almost surgical accuracy. Some bodies were found completely drained of blood, while others appeared to have been partially consumed and then abandoned. Local clergy, desperate to provide explanations for their terrified parishioners, proclaimed that the attacks were divine punishment for the community's sins. They organized prayer vigils, blessed holy water ceremonies, and led processions through the countryside. But the beast seemed utterly indifferent to religious intervention. If anything, the attacks became more frequent and more brazen. The situation became so dire that King Louis XV himself took notice. This was unprecedented, a monarch intervening in what appeared to be local wildlife management. The king dispatched Captain Duhamel, one of France's most experienced military officers, along with professional wolf hunters from Normandy, who had never failed to eliminate problem wolves. For months, these professional hunters employed every technique known to 18th century predator control. They set elaborate trap systems, organized massive hunting parties involving hundreds of local men, and even imported specially trained hunting dogs from across Europe. Yet the beast continued its reign of terror, always staying one step ahead, almost as if it could predict their strategies. What made these killings particularly disturbing wasn't just their frequency, but their deeply unsettling methodology. Experienced hunters and local physicians who examined the bodies noted that the wounds were precise, almost ritualistic in nature. Unlike typical animal attacks, which are chaotic and driven by hunger or territorial instincts, these showed signs of deliberate planning and execution. Victims were often found completely drained of blood, with specific organs removed in ways that suggested anatomical knowledge. Some bodies showed signs of being partially consumed, while others were left virtually untouched, except for fatal wounds to the throat or head. The creature seemed to kill for reasons other than hunger, a behavior that was completely unknown among documented predator attacks. The beast's behavior defied every known pattern of animal psychology. It attacked during broad daylight, showing absolutely no fear of humans or human settlements. Multiple witnesses reported seeing it walk upright on its hind legs like a man, especially when surveying potential attack sites. It possessed an almost supernatural ability to disappear into the landscape, vanishing without a trace even when surrounded by hunting parties. As the death toll climbed past 50 documented victims, local folklore began attributing supernatural powers to the beast. The older villagers whispered that it was a werewolf, a human cursed to transform into a wolf under certain conditions. Others believed it was a demon sent directly from hell to punish the region for some collective sin. The more educated residents suggested it might be some unknown species of large predator, perhaps escaped from a private menagerie. The Catholic Church, struggling to maintain its authority in the face of this unexplained terror, organized increasingly elaborate religious responses. They brought in relics from distant monasteries, conducted exorcism ceremonies, and even declared certain areas to be blessed ground that the creature supposedly couldn't enter. But every religious intervention seemed to fail spectacularly, with attacks continuing unabated. Then came the most chilling detail of all, one that still gives researchers pause today. Several survivors of attacks described the creature's eyes in remarkably consistent terms. They weren't the yellow or amber eyes typical of wolves, but distinctly human in their intelligence and malevolence. Witnesses claimed the beast would study its victims before attacking, choosing the most vulnerable targets with calculated precision that suggested a level of reasoning ability far beyond any known animal. One survivor, Marie-Jeanne Vallée, provided the most detailed account of an encounter. She described how the creature approached her slowly, almost casually, while she was working alone in a field. It circled her methodically, keeping its distance, studying her reactions. When she grabbed a farming implement to defend herself, the beast seemed to assess the threat, calculate its options, and then retreat, behavior that suggested complex problem-solving abilities. The first supposed resolution came in September 1765, when François-Antoine, the king's official wolf hunter, finally managed to kill a large wolf near the Abbey of Chazes. This animal was significantly larger than typical wolves, with unusual reddish fur and oversized fangs that seemed to match witness descriptions. The attack stopped immediately, and Antoine was celebrated throughout France as a hero who had slain the legendary beast. The wolf's body was carefully preserved and sent to the Palace of Versailles as proof of the creature's destruction. King Louis XV rewarded Antoine generously, and the story of the Beast of Gévaudan seemed to have reached its conclusion. Churches throughout the region held Thanksgiving services, and life slowly began returning to normal. But the celebration was premature and short-lived. By December 1765, just 3 months after Antoine's celebrated kill, the murders resumed with even greater ferocity than before. The new attacks were more savage, more personal, and seemed to carry an undertone of revenge. It was as if the creature had returned from the dead with a vendetta against the people who had celebrated its supposed death. This resumption of killings created a crisis of faith throughout the region. If Antoine had truly killed the beast, how could the attacks continue? Some suggested there had been multiple creatures all along. Others believed the original beast had supernatural powers of resurrection. The most terrifying theory was that the creature had never been caught at all, and that something else entirely had been responsible for the temporary cessation of attacks. The final chapter of this nightmare came in June 1767, nearly 3 years after the terror began. Local hunter Jean Chastel, a man known for his deep religious faith and silver-working skills, claimed to have encountered the beast while reading his prayer book in the forest. According to his account, he shot the creature using a specially blessed silver bullet that had been crafted by a local priest. The animal that Chastel killed was even more unusual than Antoine's wolf. When they cut it open, they discovered partially digested human remains in its stomach, including recognizable clothing fragments from recent victims. More disturbing still, the creature's anatomy showed several abnormalities that didn't match any known wolf species. Elongated limbs, unusual dental structure, and a cranium shape that seemed almost human-like in certain proportions. After Chastel's kill, the attacks ceased permanently. No similar incidents occurred in the region, and the Beast of Gévaudan passed into legend. But the questions raised by this 3-year reign of terror have never been satisfactorily answered. Here's what modern historians and criminologists find most disturbing about this entire case. When you strip away the supernatural elements and focus purely on the documented evidence, the attack patterns, victim selection, and methodology strongly suggest something far more sinister than a rogue predator. The precision of the wounds, the strategic selection of victims, the creature's apparent ability to evade capture for 3 years, and most tellingly, its complete indifference to easier prey like livestock, all point to possible human involvement. Some contemporary researchers now believe that La Bête du Gévaudan may have been France's first documented serial killer, a human predator who used trained animals, wore animal disguises, or employed weapons designed to mimic animal attacks. The 18th century mind, unable to comprehend such calculated human evil, created the legend of a supernatural beast as the only explanation that made psychological sense. Consider the evidence that supports this theory. The attacks showed clear planning and intelligence. Victims were often people who would be missed and searched for. The creature seemed to understand human psychology and behavior patterns, and most significantly, it operated in a region where a skilled hunter could easily avoid detection for years. The Beast of Gévaudan remains one of history's most fascinating cold cases, a mystery that bridges the gap between medieval superstition and modern criminal psychology. Whether it was truly an unknown species of large predator, a wolf with unusual behavioral patterns, or something far more sinister, a human monster hiding behind supernatural folklore, we may never know for certain. What do you think really stalked those French hills for 3 terrifying years? Was it an animal, a man, or something else entirely? Let me know your theories in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more dark tales from history's shadows.